Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Newsfist. The war in Ukraine seems to have entered a newer, more deadlier, more destructive phase. On Saturday, the Kerch Bridge, which links Russia to Crimea, one of the longest bridges in the world, was hit by a huge explosion, allegedly from a truck bomb, although this is slightly disputed. And, of course, since then, it has been largely overshadowed by the recent news of a widespread series of missile attacks on Kiev and other Ukrainian cities, with Russia appointing a new general to oversee the war and explicitly allowing him mass destruction tactics that were not permitted during the previous phase of the war. So we're going to get into that right now. The blast on the Crimean bridge, the bridge across the Kerch Strait, was truly spectacular. The video from this is pretty freaking amazing. I'll play it for you here. This is from the Guardian, but it's got pretty good footage. There's footage of this going all around the internet at the moment. Take a look. Truly a massive, massive explosion. Allegedly a semi-trailer filled with fertilizer, although not being an explosive expert, I can't tell. There's also this secondary footage that appears to show possibly a drone. And this is the damage, of course, as we can see. One of the roadways completely collapsed, and the railway track, which was transporting a huge convoy of petrol tankers at the time, caught on fire, melting some of the tracks.
Сегодня утром на автомобильной части Крымского моста со стороны Таманска.
The Russians have said that it was the Ukrainian SBU who blew up the bridge. The Ukrainians are being a bit coy about it, but from the looks of things, they're not saying they did it, but they're not saying they didn't do it. Zelensky basically came out and said, I believe, happy birthday, Mr. Putin. This happened on Putin's, I believe, 70th birthday. And the Ukrainians are very happy about this strike, and that there will be more to come. This is just a taste of things to come. The Russian response, I believe, is here.
Полуострова произошел подрыв грузового автомобиля, повлекший за собой возгорание 7 топливных цистерн железнодорожного состава, следовавшего в направлении Крымского полуострова. В результате частично обрушились 2 автомобильных пролета.
So according to the Russians, the truck involved came from Russia. I've read quite an intense piece on this. They were basically saying that it wasn't the guy who owned the truck, it was his uncle. He drove it through Krasnodar, I believe, onto the bridge and detonated it. They did not find the body of the driver. 3 other random people were killed in the bridge attack. Whether this was a suicide bombing or not is not really sure. The Ukrainians, if it was a suicide bombing, the Ukrainians would probably want to distance themselves from it. Suicide bombing is generally sort of frowned upon, although it is a very effective method of war, since one of the big problems with a lot of military actions like this is exfiltrating your people afterwards. If you use a suicide bomber, then you don't have to worry about getting the bomber out afterwards. Now, the BBC did an article on this, quite coy, actually. So they basically say that the truck bomb theory started to spread in Russian circles very, very quickly, and it was suspicious. It suggested the Kremlin preferred an act of terrorism to a more alarming possibility that this was an audacious act of sabotage carried out by Ukraine. Except, I believe that is basically what the Russians are saying now. Quote, I've seen plenty of large vehicle-borne IEDs in my time, according to an unnamed former British Army explosives expert. This does not look like one. I do not have the expertise to tell either way. A more plausible explanation, he said, is a kind of a massive explosion below the bridge, probably delivered using some kind of clandestine maritime drone. Now, this would be within the capability of the Ukrainians. Apparently, a number of these drones have already been found. It could also, I guess, technically have been some kind of man-piloted suicide submarine. The possibilities are endless. Bridges are generally designed to resist downward loads on the deck and a certain amount of side loading from the wind. Well, this is true. They are not generally engineered to resist upward loads. I think this fact was exploited in the Ukrainian attack. So what he's basically saying is that if the bomb was a truck and it went off on the bridge, then the downward force would have been absorbed by the pylons and the road sections would not have collapsed, whereas if the blast had come from below and up, it would have dislodged the road sections. Some observers have noted that in one of the other security camera videos, something that looks like a bow wave of a small boat appears next to one of the bridge supports a split second before the explosion. What kind of vessel could it be? I'll just play you this little link. So as we can see here, there is like a little bow wave that seems to appear just before the explosion. This is the second view from a CCTV camera, I believe, aiming underneath the bridge. But again, this is basically speculation. No one really knows, and now that the war has suddenly kicked off again, I suspect this will be forgotten about quite quickly, to be honest. The bridge is already reopened for rail and traffic, although, of course, one of the lanes is basically unusable, but the Russians will probably be able to repair that relatively quickly. Now, going on about the drone boat theory, on 21st September, images circulated on Russian social media channels showing a, quote, mysterious unmanned boat that washed ashore near Russia's naval base in Sevastopol. And the BBC links to this picture, which looks like some kind of reconnaissance sub, very, very tiny kind of thing that would only really be able to fit like one person. Fucking hell, man. Whoever would be brave enough to pilot something like that is a braver man than I'll tell you that much. It resembled a large black covered kayak, complete with bow-mounted sensors and a white periscope-looking device on top. So again, some kind of reconnaissance sub. According to local reports, the vessel was towed out to sea and blown up. A part of an unmanned vehicle was discovered. The Russians apparently took this sub out to sea and blew it up. Destroyed at sea by an explosion. No one was hurt. This is not the first time reports have circulated suggesting that Ukraine has access to such clandestine equipment. There are well-founded reports which suggest that Ukrainians have both surveillance and strike maritime remote-controlled vehicles in service, the unnamed explosive expert told the reporter. The operational concept has been developed over years, not months, which makes a certain amount of sense. If this is how Ukraine managed to attack the Kerch Bridge, hundreds of miles from Ukrainian-controlled territory, then it's one of Kiev's most ambitious operations by far. But apart from a few whispers in the capital, no one is confirming the theory. Right, but they're also not confirming it. The Ukrainians are hinting very, very heavily that it was them. They're all cheering about it. There's been photos of a mural up in the center of Kiev now, a sort of, sticker, sort of postcard with the bridge burning, and people are taking selfies in front of it. The Ukrainians basically said the head of Zelensky's office, Mikhailo Podolyak, seemed to endorse Moscow's truck bomb theory. The answer should be sought in Russia, he said in a statement. Well, I mean, that could mean really anything. He could mean that the truck came from Russia. He could mean the reason why we are attacking the bridge is in Russia because you invaded us. They said that the explosion was a result of infighting between different parts of Russia's security establishment. That seems a bit of a stretch. I don't know why the security establishment would bomb the Crimean bridge as opposed to, attempt assassination of other FSB officials. But they said this is a concrete manifestation of the conflict between the FSB, the Russia's internal intelligence service, and private military contractors like the Wagner Group on the one hand, and the Ministry of Defense and the General Staff of the Russian Federation on the other hand. Again, doesn't really say why they would be blowing up a bridge in Crimea as opposed to, I don't know, striking each other in Moscow, for example. Did Mr. Podolyak know something everyone else didn't, or was he perhaps trolling Moscow, playing on extremely raw nerves exposed by Russia's setbacks on the battlefield in Ukraine? The truth is, we don't know. That's rare for the BBC to say that, by the way. Usually the BBC is very, very certain about everything, so the fact that they say they don't know must mean that they're certain they don't know. Sussy Barker, in my opinion. It's all part of a highly successful information campaign which Ukraine has waged along with its military effort ever since Russia's full-scale invasion in February. For now, it seems to be working. Well, so this was 22 hours ago. So yesterday, Sunday afternoon. And now the Russians have responded with a massive, massive number of missile strikes all over Ukraine. There's footage for this all over the internet, all over Telegram. It's frankly goddamn harrowing. It looks like the center of Kiev has been struck. A number of government buildings. There are reports that power and electricity stations have been targeted, that there are already queues for gas in Kiev, so it seems like it's on like flan, as they say. The Russians have now decided to remove what restraint they had when coming to targeting civilian infrastructure in Kiev. Apparently, there have also been strikes in Lvov and just all over Ukraine. Allegedly, there were 75 missiles incoming, and 41 were intercepted. This is from RT. BBC has a thing on it as well, but it's one of those like stupid live update things, which is kind of annoying because if you just want sort of a snapshot of what was going on in a specific period of time, it's harder to get the info. So I'll be using RT for this. President Zelensky confirmed the attacks in a video address, saying numerous parts of Ukraine had come under fire and claimed Russia was targeting energy infrastructure and they want panic and chaos. There are reports that Lvov, Kharkiv, and Odessa have also come under fire. Seems like they were targeting the head of the Ukrainian Secret Service, the SBU. The metro has been halted and is now being used for civilian shelter. The attacks were so sudden that a BBC broadcast from Kiev was actually interrupted live on air by the incoming missile strikes. We have footage for you here.
Also full of symbolism. So the fear is that this could trigger a very strong Russian response. We saw yesterday that a residential area of the city of Zaporizhia, a major city in the south of the country, very close to the front lines, was hit. More than a dozen.
Okay, Hugo Bashega there, our correspondent in Kiev, obviously.
Woof. So it's definitely kicked up a notch. What's going to happen next is the real question. Well, there are reports that troops are amassing on the northern border of Ukraine, Belarus, and that Ukraine has blown up bridges to Belarus and mined all the roads. So they're clearly expecting an attack southward from Belarus, probably to Kiev. This is again from RT. Ukrainian forces have destroyed almost all bridges and mined the roads along the border with Belarus. Anatoly Lapo, chairman of the State Border Committee of Belarus, said on Sunday, so this was yesterday, today, almost all border bridges have been blown up and automobile and railway border routes are completely mined. Ukrainian forces have fortified the border to the extent that they put anti-tank mines in three rows on the roads. The troops Kiev have sent to the border are not border guards. We are under pressure. They are aiming at our border guards. Sometimes they shoot in the air. Constant aerial reconnaissance is being carried out. A day before the news broke, Ukraine's foreign ministry claimed that its ambassador to Belarus was summoned to the Belarusian foreign ministry and handed an official note saying that Ukraine is planning to conduct a strike on the territory of Belarus. The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry said that it categorically rejects the accusation, adding that it could be part of a Russian plan to stage a provocation and further accuse Kiev. Earlier this week, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko accused Ukraine of massing tens of thousands of soldiers near the border, while Lukashenko allowed Russian troops to enter Ukraine from its territory at the beginning of Russia's military operation/invasion. He said last week that Belarus's role in the conflict is limited to self-defense and denying Ukraine the ability to shoot Russians in the back from the territory of Belarus. Well, exactly. So that's the Belarusians. That's what they would say. That's the Ukrainians. That's what the Ukrainians would say. But the fact that there are persistent rumors of military buildup and tensions along the northern Ukrainian, southern Belarusian border is extremely concerning. This is beginning to look like the war is about to escalate beyond the east of Ukraine, the Donbass and other regions that Russia has annexed, and may begin to more seriously affect Ukraine, even Western Ukraine, Kiev, Lvov. I mean, again, there have already been numerous missile strikes. And what is this going to entail? Well, I mean, that's the real question. If it gets really bad, then the real question on everyone's lips is, will the US or will NATO officially enter the war? Now, everyone's been basically waiting for Russia to make a mistake and trigger Article 5. But the only way that Article 5 could be triggered is if Russia basically attacked a NATO country, which, according to the Russians, is one of the reasons why they didn't want Ukraine to join NATO. So this would mean that the Russians would have to attack Poland, which so far has not happened, and would be strategically pretty stupid, because if the Russians did that, the entirety of the EU plus NATO would come down on them like a sack of bricks directly, as opposed to just in a proxy war sense. But if things get bad enough on the ground, and it's certainly looking like it, the appointment of this new Russian general, whose name I forget, but I believe his nickname is Armageddon. That doesn't sound fucking good. Was apparently appointed because Putin's circle were chastising him for not going harder on the Ukrainians, and allegedly he has now been authorized to basically target everything. Now, if this is indeed the case, then the Ukrainians, particularly those in Kiev, are in for a very, very bad time, and this whole thing is about to get a million times worse. Whether things will get so bad that it sucks NATO into it, officially, as opposed to sort of unofficially, with them just providing weapons and support and intelligence, is anyone's guess. But at the moment, it does not seem like anyone is suing for peace at all. It doesn't seem like anyone is talking peace. It doesn't. Peace is not a word that anyone is talking about. And no wonder, really, because according to President Erdogan of Turkey, in order to have peace, Putin wants a grand bargain. He doesn't just want Ukraine to go neutral. He basically wants assurances from the West that they will leave Russia alone. He wants to erase the humiliations of the post-Cold War period, according to a top Turkish advisor, which was told to CNN. Ibrahim Kalin predicted that the Ukraine conflict will inevitably end in a negotiated settlement, with the only question being when and how much damage has been done by then. Well, all wars eventually end. How is this one going to end? Such a settlement, he said, would be more about the borders of Russia and Ukraine, arguing that what Putin really aims to do is renegotiate the balance of power between Moscow and the West after a weakened Russia accepted several rounds of NATO expansion in the aftermath of the Cold War. Our understanding is that Mr. Putin wants to have a new grand bargain, a new deal with the West, Kalin said. The Turkish official referenced agreements signed by Moscow and NATO in the early 1990s, which included the 1997 NATO-Russia Founding Act, which stated that the alliance would continue to expand, and the Budapest Memorandum, in which Russia agreed not to use force against its neighbours. Well, that didn't go very far. The Russian perception is that the Russia of the day that signed the agreement, the Russia of the Gorbachevs and Yeltsins, is over. There is a new Russia, there is a new world, there is a new reality, and they want a new bargain. Well, the West is never going to frickin' agree to this, obviously. Putin declared last week that the, quote, ongoing collapse of Western hegemony is irreversible, that things will never be the same. A multipolar world will give non-Western nations an opportunity to strengthen their sovereignty. According to Carlin, this puts, of course, the entire global order, the liberal order, to a test. So far, the response has been war from both sides. Now, this means essentially, the West is never going to accept a deal like that. The liberal world order is essentially the sort of crowning global achievement of the West, and they take a very dim view to anyone messing with it. The Russians and the Chinese also, and many other countries, view this Western-led rules-based international order as stifling and fundamentally benefiting the West at the extent of other countries. And it looks like it's now gotten so bad that they are preparing to go to war over it. Will we see World War III? It's looking increasingly likely, bros. It doesn't seem like anyone, as I said, is seriously talking peace. The two sides are not even talking to each other at all. I believe they're sort of talking through Turkey, and both sides seem to be like, oh, well, we're not going to make peace with these people. Of course, the whole point of peace is that you have to make it with your enemy. You have to make it with the people you hate the most. That's why it's called, a negotiated peace. You don't have a negotiated peace with your friends and allies because they're your allies. So God knows how long this is going to drag on before either side really starts seriously talking to one another. We seem to have the position of both belligerents. The Ukrainians are saying that they will only accept peace when the original borders of Ukraine, including Crimea, are returned to Ukraine. The Russians aren't going to do that. And the Russians seem to be saying that they will only accept peace when the liberal rules-based international order is fundamentally reworked, and the West is not going to accept that. So it looks like it's on. Again, what's going to happen next, I have no idea. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, please subscribe, for God's sake. If you're watching this and you're not subscribed, subscribe. I should have done this earlier in the video because now it's at the end of the video. You can just click off. I know how you do. Send us some library point coins, leave us a comment, and we'll see you again in a couple of days. Good night.